How's it going, YouTube? Coming to you today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be the sideboard and how you're going to be able to go about that in your next event. I know that can be very scary, very daunting, but I want to go through each individual way that you can go ahead and really assess your sideboard mid-game, the swap-ups you have to do really quickly on the fly whenever you see a new engine in a deck that you weren't prepared for, or perhaps whenever you play against a deck that you're not too familiar with. I'm going to talk about how you can correctly side, how you can incorrectly side, and what kind of variances will occur, as well as some very cool side cards that you can be running for this format. Now, a couple things that I want to just get out of the way before we hop into the video is, one, there has been some personal hate directed toward me for just some of the videos that I release. Listen, that gets a little weird, and I mean, it's the internet, it's going to happen. I'm just going to throw it out there right now. I'm doing my content. I'm having a great time doing it. I'm going out and I'm doing well with tier. It is what it is. Pearl Arena all day. But, for me, I do this content because I think that it helps the community tenfold. And I love being able to help the community. So I am just actively blocking many accounts that are commenting some gnarly things, to be honest. But it doesn't hurt me, okay? Like, I'm going to keep making content. I'm going to keep doing my thing. I appreciate each and every one of you that have been along for the ride, and I appreciate each and every one of you that are staying for the ride. I'm going to keep being as real as possible in these videos. My raw takes on the game, I don't fold when it comes to a take in the game. If I believe that a card needs to get banned, or something is toxic, or a deck needs to get hit, I'm gonna talk about it because I think that's how it should be. And, everyone has their opinion on certain things. And I feel like that's one thing alone where, from my perspective, I'm very hyper competitive. I like tier 0 formats. I like triangle formats. I do not like diverse metas. I think they're horrible for the game. And, that's okay. And we can disagree on that. But basically what I'm getting at is that if you harshly disagree with something that is in a video, feel free to express that. That's wonderful. But put it like your own words on it, right? Like, don't make it an attack. Like, let's have a conversation. I love theory. I love talking, and I love the ability to change someone's mind based on something that is said. So if I say that Tenpai is the worst, most skillless deck in the game possible, give me your devil's advocate. Tell me why it's not, right? I love that. Communication, crazy, right? So that's one thing where I'm just like, work with me on that, right? Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why it's so important to play certain decks, or why it's important to have certain decks in the game. And, that's one thing that I really want this channel to be, is a spot where people can go to, people can theory, and people can really just enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! And, we're all going to dislike certain things, we're all going to like certain things, but let's have some good creative conversation in the comment section below. The other thing that I want to touch on today is going to be the binder that I still have for giveaways. So I have this binder that I carry on me at every event, and it's going to have just ample amounts of cards in it. Just all the staples that you can imagine in here that are going to be really helpful moving forward. And if you need cards, please walk up to me and ask to look at the binder, because that's what this binder is here for, and it gets restocked all the time. If you need cards, and I potentially have them in the binder, like Drolls, Ashes, Veilers, Imperiums, things like that, that's what this is here for. And if you're at Niagara, come find me, because I'm giving away cards all the time. And, for me, I just want to see as many people in this game play as possible. I think that's the most important thing, is just inclusivity and making sure that everyone has a chance. And, sometimes that's where people's arguments come in for things like Tenpai, because, it is cheaper, it's really competitive. But I feel like when decks like that exist, like, we just need healthier, still competitive, but, like, not super toxic decks that are able to still accomplish a lot within the game, right? And I feel like that's just something that can just be another conversation point, right? But without further ado, let's hop right on into the video. We're going to be talking a lot today about siding. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Imperium Duelist, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RAW, Grimoire. Definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. Follow my Twitter, follow my Twitch, and then subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because we're trying to hit 30,000 by the end of the year. That'd be wonderful. Now, without further ado, let's hop right on in. So one of the things that I think is a really cool option for the sideboard right now is Shared Ride. If you are activating Fuo on your opponent going second, it's kind of nice to have a Shared Ride when you're going first, but I also feel like you need a card to draw into that's really important. So I feel like if you're playing Fuo or you're playing cards like Shared Ride, you might really want to consider playing cards like Nibiru or even like Uka, like we're seeing lately. These are things that we really want to make sure we're playing, because you have to have something that you're drawing into to make the draws worth it. Now, if you're going second, I think that's fine, because you can just draw into more engine to like crack a board. But usually you want some kind of like higher payoff if you're going to be playing cards like this. I think you play Fuo in general, but if you are playing any kind of a draw card, I always believe that you have to play cards like Nibiru as well. One of the things to really think about into your side deck that is really important is that if your opponent is going to be activating Fuo or Purulia on you, you should be on thrust to set things like DD Ground, D Barrier, Threatening Roar, cards that will allow you to live and have you the choice to not play that turn, pass to your opponent, and essentially skip their turn to make their Fua or their Purulia useless. And you can flip these when they commit to the board so they can't drop another Mulcharmy on you. One of the other tech cards that I think could be really good right now is Lancia and Iron Wall. Iron Wall is really good against things like Runic Stun and Ritual Beast, as is Lancia. Iron Wall is, of course, if you're going first, Lancia if you're going second. So if you are in a weird position and you feel like you really have a hard time against things like Ritual Beast or Stun, you definitely have the opportunity to play these cards. I do like Lancia as well, because it is a direct counter to things like Evenly. So if you are playing against a deck like Ritual Beast, it just completely shuts them down. And Evenly is still pretty popular right now, so it's kind of nice. You can also use this against things like Kashtira as well. So definitely think about both of these cards. I like Iron Wall a lot just because it kind of randomly shuts down quite a bit. So it's going to be your Evenlys, your Ritual Beasts, your Stuns, any kind of like really random banished effects too, or if you're worried about like Bistils or Crow or anything like leaving the grave, you just have such a wonderful opportunity right now to play cards like these that I think are really undervalued right now in the format. One of the cards that I also think is very undervalued right now is Bell. Bell also can hit Wanted Poster, which Wanted Poster is even more important to hit now than ever. You can also use Bell to hit things like Bite and Dragon's Effect, which is also really important to stop you from dying, hypothetically. Another thing too is that Bell in general is really good against some of the decks that could be played to kind of counter the Mulcharmies, things like Labyrinth, to be able to hit like the Big Welcome, and just various decks in the format right now. I think that Bell has a lot of very solid application, and you probably wouldn't be punished too hard by playing even like 2 Bell in your sideboard. I think it'll come up for you. The next thing here is going to be a huge shout out to Craig from my team. I do like Zombie World and Banshee. After talking with him about these cards, I think that they are both pretty solid. Being able to turn off things from being a fiend is huge. Playing against things like Tenpai, they are no longer dragons. There are a lot of very solid applications behind this. You can also late trigger the Banshee. So if your board gets like Lightning Storm, Duster, and then you can go ahead and use Banshee from your grave and then activate the Zombie World, forcing your opponent to go into something like a Kui Belt or a Black Rose to go ahead and try and out your Zombie World. So it gives you another moment to try and do something else instead of dying. These cards can be pretty effective moving forward. How effective, I'm not too sure, but it is something that you can consider moving forward. The next thing is Metatronus. I'm pretty sure this goes without saying. This card's just kind of broken. This does get ashed, unfortunately, but there's a lot of things to ash right now, so maybe not. This card is very solid for what it is, being able to just go ahead and summon out another monster for free, being able to go ahead and banish a monster on the board face down if you summon out the same card. So there is a lot of very good uses behind this card, especially clearing things like even a Caesar. So definitely go ahead and consider this card, because especially if you're playing a lot of the better decks right now, this card is going to be very relevant. My personal favorite right now is Book of Moon. Book of Moon is really solid because you can Book of Moon the Hugin that goes in the EMZ against things like Runic Whitewood or Runic Stun. If you book him in the Hugin, your opponent really can't do anything about it, and there's no way to really clear it, and it makes things very awkward. The other thing too is that Book of Moon allows you to dodge a lot of very unfortunate effects, and then you can also use it for like really good one-for-one trades, especially if you're worried about things like Caesar or your opponent has some pretty crazy end boards. It's always been pretty good, and it's something too where, let's say you're playing a deck like Ritual Beast, they do use Book of Eclipse to dodge Nibiru and then Contact Fuse off, which is pretty solid, but I do like the Book of Moon in particular over Eclipse because it cannot get Ash Blossomed. I don't like leaving a lot of things up for chance or variables to be open, so this is something that I think is a very good card first or going second, and I think that in a side where you have to worry about 7 or 8 different decks, because right now I feel like that's where we're at, other than like the best 2 decks in the game right now, which are Yubel and Snake, there's still a lot of other decks that are viable at the moment, and you really want cards that are good first or second. I think this is one of those that really do check both boxes. So a couple do's and don'ts when it comes to siding. I really do feel like if you're playing a pot card or something that you just don't want to see multiples of, especially you got to think about it going into game 3 if you're going first or second. It's a very important game and you do not want the opportunity to brick. So you do want to make sure that you're having the most variance as possible as far as opening a good hand. So if you do have cards like pot in your deck, you want to pull out the third one, because if you play 3, you will see it, potentially. If you play 2, you could see it, and you wouldn't see it in multiples. If you play 1, it's going to be really rough to try to see it in your opener, right? So that's kind of the general rule when it comes to deciding 1, 2, or 3. Don't side out engine unless you need to, because I see a lot of people who side out a bunch of engine, and then they draw too much sideboard, and then they brick. So my rule has always been 6, because anything over 6, you're going to be risking seeing too much sideboard. Anything under 6, you're not seeing enough sideboard. And that can be really unfortunate. Now, you could have situations where you only side in 3 cards because your main deck is already built to beat the matchup, which is fine. But you have to look at it from an objective standpoint of, do you have enough mix of side cards, cards that are effective against the matchup, and engine? Because if you don't see a good mix of both, you probably still lose. There are situations where you have to put in like Spear Mode, Lava Golem, and Evenly just to have a chance against certain matchups, and that's understandable. But you want to make sure that you're not siding out any engine unless it's like maybe 1 copy of something that you're just like not really needing, right? So you really have to kind of consider that, and it always is going to change. Sideboarding is never absolute. So you're always going to have to consider different options, because it's going to be really important when it comes to decision making. Another thing is you want to side out 1 of each of your hand traps if you're going first. Sometimes play sets. So like if you're going first, you want to side down Fuaros down to 1 if you're playing cross out. And if you're not, then you just side out all Fuaros, all Perulia. But if you're going first and you have just like generic hand traps besides like the Mulch Armies, you're pulling out Droll, you're pulling out your Ogres, you're pulling out like your Crows, unless they're like really good into the matchup. Like if you're playing against Lab, you're not pulling out Ash Blossom, but you would definitely pull out Droll, because Droll does absolutely nothing. So there's never going to be an absolute me telling you exactly this is what you do versus like every matchup, because every matchup is different. But you have to just keep in the ones that are going to be really effective. And if they're not that effective, you want to side them out for your sideboard, because of the fact that you are trading non-engine for non-engine. So that hand trap might not be the best when you're going first, but the non-engine you're siding in is better. So it's taking that slot. And I feel like a lot of people forget that, because they're like, well, I don't have any hand traps in my deck. But there are other cards being supplemented into your deck list instead, because those cards are coming out and you're putting better cards in for that matchup specifically. So sometimes, especially against a deck like Lab, you're just pulling out a bunch of cards that just do nothing. So like Ogre, Droll, Phantasme if you're playing it right. Just cards that realistically don't do that much. And then you're keeping in like your Ashes, potentially even DD Crow. I like DD Crow a lot, because if they go rollback target something, you can banish the card they target, and then it just like resolves without effect. That, or if they go like Ku-Klok the Reborn, you banish Ku-Klok, they don't control a Labyrinth monster, and they can't use a trap they just set. So there's a lot of different things that you got to consider. but I do think that there's a lot of different variances when it comes to sideboarding. Let me show you a live example of sideboarding. So here's an old list of Yubel, and I decided to use this one because I think that it's going to be very useful in terms of explaining the sideboard. So another thing that I think is really important when it comes to your ratios is I like everything in 5s. So even if you're going to be siding something out, like right here, you have 3 opening and then you have 1 and 1. And it's really only 1 and 3 because this doesn't get you anywhere. It's just going to be these. So I don't necessarily ever want to just be siding these out, especially going first, because these are like some of my best cards that I can open. But like, let's say I'm going second and I'm going into like Snake Eyes. I just kind of like hover over everything that I have. And I'm going to say like, okay, maybe I don't need this. I can just have like the 1 Beckoning Beast, and then I can just utilize the Reborn later on with something different. And that way I can at least have this, and then I can also be able to get this back if I need to, or like this, because this card's supplemental and it can be able to bring back other things that are also really important. So you can go ahead and get rid of a brick, especially you got to think about like, if I'm in game 3, I treat every time that I'm siding like it's game 3 and I need to win, right? Because I think that if you don't, then you undervalue how important the game is, and you could just like auto lose because you sided wrong. And I think that that's one thing where you kind of have to prioritize certain cards. So like if I'm going second, I'm pulling out like the Chaos, I'm pulling out the Abominable, because I don't want to see this card in my hand going second at all. I have 6 cards that I can draw to try to like break the board, and these are just things that I don't want to draw, right? Like at all. So another thing here to think about too is that the matchup I'm going to be playing into here being Snake Eye, I have 3, 6, 9... This is going to be 11, 14, 17 hand traps going into it, which is really solid. So we do know that Perilia here is going to cook. So we want to make sure that we can have Perilia around. And this is where sometimes you have to just go ahead and side out like 1 of everything. And these cards are all really impactful. But like I might set out like a Bistral, just because I feel like the cards that I'm siding on are already going to be like really supplemental, and it's already like fine with what I'm going to be adding in. The other thing too is, let's say that I want like the Dark Ruler here as well. So I'm going to go with like the 6 side in. And this is where you kind of have to really determine. So I'm going second. I'm going to side out like a copy of Engraver, because I don't want to open double Engraver or like Engraver Tract, right? Because that's just really unfortunate if you draw a hand like that. You could argue to go ahead and cut 2. I do like Engraver though going second, because it does allow you things like the Requiem Send, which is crazy, on any opportunity that you're allowed there. But we do have like the Dark Ruler, so I might pull out like a Veiler, because this is just going to be the supplemental negation anyway. And then I might even just cut an opening here, because it's going to be something that I already have a 3 of chance to open it, which is pretty solid. And if you are like really desperate, you can do this for the Beckoning Beast to be able to get to this as well. So there are other ways to be able to get to it as well. But Dark Beckoning is really good, but going second, you always want to prioritize as much non-engine as possible here. So this would be our 6. And so we can at least here go done siding 2, and then see what our hand would look like. So we're going second. We're just going to drop the Perilia and draw phase. We're going to assume they go like Witch and maybe like Poplar. So we get 2 draws here. So we're going to get Ash Engraver. Let's just say that we use both of these because that's just realistic. And then we draw for turn. So now we have a very adequate hand. Like a very adequate hand. We have Throne, we have Pain, we have Squirmer, and Engraver to be able to crack the board with. And to be honest, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. So that's one thing where you really have to understand when it comes to your siding, it's extremely important to get right, because if you get it wrong, you're going to be in a rough spot. So going second here, we have Imperium, Nibiru, and Dark Ruler. These are already like the God combo. And then we also have Samsara and Throne. So we can just fan them right away and then go Samsara. It's kind of crazy. Plus we get a draw here being Sharvara. So it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. So we can go back to siding here. And that's kind of what a perfect side can do for you, right? If you really understand the core of siding, that's one thing that you can get so much right. So let's say you're playing against like Runic Stun, right? You're going second against Runic Stun, and you want to make sure that you're going to have an adequate number of cards that are going to do well into the matchup. One of the things that you can consider is I side Abomination for every kind of control matchup. I think in that regard, I'm probably just cutting like the Princess because it's not really doing anything for me right now. So that'll just swap out. And then if I'm looking at other cards that are going to be really impactful here, it's probably going to be like Cosmic Cyclone. So they're not going to summon any Link monsters, so the Phantasmas go out. They're not going to be doing 5 summons, so Nibiru's go out. I'm also probably not super concerned about Bistals. I'll probably cut like one of them because it's not going to be that good. And then I'll probably cut the Abominable as well. I'm going second, but it's going to be a slower game. So it's still something where you want to make sure that you're just seeing an optimal hand. I'm probably still putting in the Judgments. Probably. And then the other thing too is I'm probably going to put in the Panks here. And I'll tell you why too. So I'll probably put like a Chaos Summoning because again, going second, you just don't want to see like a lot of bricks. So the Pank is really solid because if they summon out like a Hugin to protect their fountain, you can just summon Pank. And then if they like flip something to target the Pank, if you try to battle over Hugin, then you're already trading for a lot because you go battle phase, they flip like flashing fire or freezing curses, and then you go chain Pank and you target like fountain and they chain the Hugin. So you already traded for like multiple interactions that your opponent just doesn't get back, right? So I think that's really important as well. And even if it's like just a interactive game state where you can put up something where it's a quick effect pop, if you can just like book a moon, a Hugin, or deal with the Hugin, or deal with something on the board and bait out like an interruption, or make your opponent protect their fountain with a Hugin and then use Pank effect on the fountain, there's a lot of really nice ways that you can play around your opponent having things like fountain. So this would be a really optimal side in for me. And sometimes you can go over 6 if you just have that many dead cards in your deck that just don't matter. And even if you're going second, it's going to be a slow matchup. So you still want to put in Judgments because it's still going to be really important to have later on in the grind game. We'll go ahead here and draw a card for our 6th. We're going to get the Beckoning Beast. This is already a really good hand. And then we have Judgment as well. So we'll go ahead and just shuffle it back up here as well. So we have the Valor full combo, the Imperium, and the Cosmic. So this is already going to cook. And then we get another really solid starter. So there's a lot of very good things that you can do with your siding that's going to make it very effective going into matchups that can be really difficult. But that's where you kind of have to look at your sideboard objectively and figure out what you want for an event. So for me, typically I break it down. And so it isn't like this right now, but like on a typical side, I do 6 cards for going first, 6 cards for going second, and then 3 utility cards. So my utility cards are usually like Droplet or Judgment. Then I have my going first cards, which is going to be like Thrust with a trap to set and maybe like some kind of Floodgate. And then going second cards, right, I'll have like my Dark Rulers, my Evenlies, what have you. And it's just a really easy way for me to be able to go through my sideboard and know exactly what I need at all times. And they have to be effective into multiple matchups as well. I really do hope that this video did help you with siding. I know it can be really difficult, really daunting, but I want to make it as easy as possible. If you haven't already followed my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or joined my Discord, or even subscribed to the channel, definitely consider doing all those right now, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.